Okay, welcome. My name is Margaret Graziano, and I'm here with Lacey Meyer of Keen Alignment. And today we're going to have a conversation about getting culture, shaping culture, keeping culture in the age of COVID-19 and all the implications that there are with that. So we're going to start by showing you a quick little video. Enjoy and get a sense of what's going on in the hearts and heads of your people. So I like to show that at the beginning of this conversation because it's important to get into the world and into the hearts and heads of the people who work for you, of the people you work for, and of the people you interact with. Never before in our history have we experienced so much happening that interrupts our normal cadence of life. So what are some of the long-term impacts of COVID-19? So more and more people are working remote, and I could have had the whole line filled, but I'm talking about the long-term impacts. And what we're seeing and what the executives that I hang out with on a regular basis, we kind of have these forecasts, is that the office is going to go to office hoteling, where there's reserved spaces for people to come in and work. They may have their own sink, they may have their own refrigerator, they might have their own kitchen area, but there's going to be shifting going on, which you already see. And there is a strong sense that that is going to be the way it is in the future, and that many, many people will work remote, and then those who don't want to will do this in and out of the office. The ability to communicate with other people will never be more important than right now and in the future, because we've lost that ability to be in the same office as somebody. So our words and what we say and what we don't say and gestures and follow up, all of that's going to be critically important, more than it's ever been before. Stress management. Now you might say, well, we have a wellness program. No, I mean actually teaching your employees how to deal with stress, how to deal with pressure, how to deal with adversity, how to deal with not really knowing what's coming next. I live in Santa Cruz, California, and yesterday I woke up to a house engulfed in smoke. And I swear to God, the first thought I had is, oh, great, I got to pack up and leave. But it was just smoke. The fires aren't by my house. But the fact that I even have to wake up in the middle of COVID-19 and think about that is interesting. Working for purpose. Now, we've heard that the millennials and the Gen Z want to work for a purpose and need to work for a purpose, but more and more, everybody wants to understand their purpose and know what their purpose is and why are they working and what difference are they making. Because let's face it, with everything coming at us, if we don't feel purposeful in our work, all the little stuff grades on us. Social responsibility. For sure, the millennials and the Gen Z are demanding that their bosses step up and be responsible and that their culture is inclusive and diverse and it's equal. There's equanimity. But there's also the social responsibility of climate change and how are we treating our neighbors? This is going to become part of what it is to create culture in the future. In many organizations, it already is. And having causes that people together can work for or that the business is in service of. Off-site team building is going to become more important than ever because people aren't together. So instead of being together in the office, you're going to have all these disparate people, and then they're going to get together as an event to connect. And you're already seeing it in parks, you're seeing it in public places, outside, of course. But my son works for Facebook, and one of the things they said is we're going to have more. And first of all, they told him they don't have to come back till next summer. And maybe not even then, but what they're going to do is they're going to start having these small team gatherings so that they can keep the collaboration and keep the connection. Personal leadership training, not just leadership training for the executives or the managers, but personal responsibility, personal response agility, the ability to calm oneself down and understand maybe how to be mindful at work, or how to be a better communicator. So personal leadership training is going to be a big deal. Less and less individual contributors and more teams because people need that connection. And many people already are and are continuing to accelerate their retirement. It's like, it's not worth it. So people are handing in their resignation to move on. So I want to talk a little bit about the 4 fundamental needs of human beings. And this entire conversation is probably not what you thought it was going to be. And hang with me, because culture is the output or what people see in terms of behavior, in terms of how people work together. Culture is all about the human experience at work. And we have to take a step back and understand more about the human experience and the mechanics of being human for us to make any kind of lasting impact in culture. So typically people live, people work, people coach, people get training from the outside in. This program is about inside out. So let's talk about the 4 fundamental human needs: certainty, uncertainty, connection, and significance. So fundamental. All human beings need some semblance of certainty. Actually, the brain works in pattern and the brain needs certainty. And uncertainty is variety, action, change of scenery, getting out of this room and maybe going to my dining room table or my office downstairs. That could be all the uncertainty, or maybe it's leaving Santa Cruz and going to Lake Tahoe or going to work outside, but it's uncertainty, variety, changing it up. So you can start to see that the implications of COVID is people don't have a lot of certainty in terms of their job, in terms of their customer base, in terms of their future, even if they're in an essential business. And there's a lot of the same thing every day. Like people say, well, it's just another day, weekend, weekday, it doesn't really matter. It's all the same scenery to me. Connection, it's a basic human need to be connected to other people. And when you're in isolation, when let's say you're living alone or at home a lot of the time and you can't connect with your colleagues in touch, in person, you're missing a basic human need. And then significance. Human beings, and some more than others, have a need for significance, a need to know they're valued, they're appreciated, their job, what they're doing actually matters. And so in the face of COVID, we have uncertainty almost daily, whether it's economic, it's about the virus, it's about the natural circumstances happening in the environment, meaning climate. We have a lot of isolation, even if we're living with our family. We're isolated from our friends, we're isolated from other people. Yeah, maybe you might go to lunch occasionally, but you're probably not doing a lot of hugging. And that's another human need, connection. And stress. So fear, uncertainty, and doubt is what causes people anxiety, stress, maybe hopelessness, maybe depression. And that's what COVID has brought. So, you know, there's some organizations that are doing a great job of having gatherings and getting people together and maybe sending food to people's houses. All of that's very nice to do. And we want to take a step back and understand the basic human experience of what's going on. So I showed you the video because I want to really drive home the point that what's been happening in, let's say, the last 20 years, the millennium, is the drivers of engagement, what people need, are getting heightened, and what they're getting is lessening. 58% of employees told Gallup that they would trust a complete stranger over and above their own boss. 45% of employees surveyed, not by me, but by Gallup, said that they lack trust in leadership, and that's one of the biggest concerns that they have. So I understand people don't know. We don't know what's going to happen with the business, so we're not communicating. But in the absence of communication, people make things up. And they never make anything empowering up. Consider yourself when you were dating and you really liked somebody and they didn't call you back. You make up the worst case scenarios. You don't make up, oh my God, they're so in love with me, they're not calling me back, because they just don't know what to say to me. You're making up, oh, they're not attracted to me, they're blah, 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 blah. Same thing happens at work. In the absence of communication, people make up things and they make up worst case scenarios. 55% of employees agree that their manager is transparent, which means 45% of people think their manager is not. So we've got all of these factors, and then right in the middle of it is this pretty large lack of trust. So I want to take a further step back about what's so with human beings. So the National Science Institute says that human beings have on average of 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts a day. And here's the news on that. 85% of those thoughts are negative and repetitive. And they're happening, they're churning, just like the heart is churning blood or pumping blood, or the lungs are breathing in and out. There's part of our nervous system that's automatic. Thoughts are like that. They're automatic. They just keep coming. And most human beings are not even aware of that they're having thoughts, and that they're having disempowering thoughts, including you and I. Unless you really study this, and even if you're in an 8-day course, which I just got out of the second time I've taken it, because I am a person who loves to master different distinctions. But even being in the course, there's times where they asked us, well, what are you thinking about? And we had to stop and go, oh, and then we had to witness ourselves thinking and then thinking about thinking. And so here's the deal. If 85% of human beings' thoughts are negative and repetitive, and there's about 12 to 60,000 thoughts a day, and most of the news we're getting in to our prefrontal cortex is already negative, it's sort of hopeless to try to create a party for people on Friday and ship pizza to their house. That's temporary. It's a temporary fix at best. The real work is getting into what's going on with people. So whether it's Zoom or Blue Jeans or Microsoft Teams, what's going on with your people? Are you checking in really? Are you having open conversations? I remember when COVID first started, we started having, I should have been doing it before, but I wasn't. Every single day in the morning, we started having meetings. And sometimes we just talked about how people were doing. And then I started noticing my clients. I was sharing with them what I was learning. They started having daily meetings. Some are having 2 times a day. But it's not just the meeting. It's checking in. What's going on with people with their own life, with their own kids, with being teachers. Now they're teachers and daycare teachers and taking care of their dog who wants constant attention because now they're home, and they're juggling dinner and lunch and breakfast for all these people, and they've got a job. And they're worried about keeping their job because they know they have to perform because, you know, there's a whole lot of people looking for jobs right now. So what's going on with your people? It would be really powerful to just have a conversation and ask. But I'll give you some insight into what's going on with people as well. So if you've been in any of my other programs, this is a little bit of a repeat. I know we have several people on this call, maybe even 50 who've not heard me speak yet about the 7 levels, but I'll make it quick. So there's 7 levels of personal, group, and organizational effectiveness. This is sort of a barometer for what's going on in the organization, in the Zoom room. We'll just say Zoom because we're on Zoom now, and with people. The lowest level of effectiveness is the state of hopelessness, where you actually don't see that there could be any positive hope at all. Like you've given up. You forgot about the dreams. You forgot about how excited you were about your job, and it's become a grind. For me, my version of hopelessness is when I was going through a lawsuit for a software company that my partner and I had started, and we made a deal with the wrong person. And the day that I knew it was falling apart, I could not get out of bed that day. And it took an external force, my son, who at the time probably was 22, 23, to say, hey, lady, you're not the person who raised me. Get out of bed. Otherwise, I didn't even know that I didn't even know, and I didn't even know it, that I was in a state of hopelessness. I thought I was just coping. Next, lowest level of effectiveness is fear. In fear, we are either grasping, oh my God, I got to get all this stuff done, or we're pushing something away that we don't have. So we're not present because we are in a heightened state of anxiety. So what I like to say about fear is it's like a low-grade amygdala hijack running all the time in the background. Amygdala hijack, we've got this thing in our brain called an amygdala. It's sort of cavemanish, cavewomanish, and it's the part of our brain that shoots out a warning sign that we might be in trouble. Well, for many people, the entire COVID has been a low-grade amygdala hijack. So that means our sympathetic nervous system is on edge, waiting for the next shoe to drop. The next state that is the highest state of ineffectiveness is frustration. And this is where, you know, there is a little anger, there's frustration, there might be something called annoia, but there's this wanting to do something, wanting to make something happen. So it's the highest level of the ineffectiveness state, but its power begins there. Because you've heard people say, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. It's often the mother of invention or innovation. Because in frustration, at least there's energy to do something about it. In hopelessness, remember, I was back in my bedroom. So then there's something that we like to call the power and freedom line. Once we step over the power and freedom line, now we're doing something about it. We want to take a stand for a future that we believe in, a future that we think could make a difference. And so we act even in the face of not knowing what's going to happen. That's making a declaration. Like, I am going to create the world's best culture, or I'm going to triple the size of my consulting firm during COVID-19, or I'm going to go out and get my dream job, or I'm going to write that book. And that's courage. Or another example for me, I signed up for the Lake Tahoe 100 miles around Lake Tahoe when I lived in Chicago. 10 minutes before I signed up, I was in fear. I am never doing that. I couldn't do that. Only crazy people do that. And then my friend Sandra said, well, what if you did it? What would be possible? And I said, man, I could do anything then. And the moment it came out of my mouth, I knew I was signing up for the most beautiful ride in America. And it was courage that had me sign up, and courage that had me start training. Engagement. In a state of engagement, there's toleration and motivation for people who are different. You don't, if you've got an organization that is operating truly in engagement, you don't need a diversity program to fix exclusion. You might need to do the diversity program because it's the right thing to do and to teach people about implicit bias and unconscious bias. And we're actually going to talk about that a little bit today. But mostly, if you really have an engaged workforce, it already is inclusive. You're already considering equality and equanimity and gender and all of it. So in engagement, people are connected, they're collaborating, they're working together, and mostly people are operating at a very high level of individual and group effectiveness. Then it comes to innovation, and this is where we throw out all the agendas from the past, and we're just looking at the problem and dropping in to our infinite intelligence. The egos are dropped, the agendas are dropped. The who wants to be the most important person in the room, all that's ego. And all that people are operating in service of is discovering a new solution. That's innovation. And then synchronicity. This is when the entire organization is operating in sync with each other. Now, some people say, Maji, I'm always in synchronicity. Well, even some of the most prolific spiritual leaders say, you know what, they're lucky to get in synchronicity 5 minutes a day. In synchronicity, all is well with the world. We're not worried about the fire. We're not worried about the smoke. We're not worried about our mom getting COVID. We're not worried about our job. We are at peace, at one with the universe. That's synchronicity. So I want to talk a little bit about the inside out mechanics of being a human being. So let's talk about the inside out nature and the mechanics of being a human being. We all have thought. Actually, repetitive, nonstop thinking, brrr, just automatic. You know, when you try to meditate, those thoughts, or right now thinking, what does she mean thoughts? It's constant. And our thoughts are mostly not helpful when we are not operating from our highest level of intelligence or our infinite wisdom. Then there's consciousness. Consciousness is the ability to see oneself thinking. Oh, isn't that interesting? I'm on a date and there's a guy and I'm interested in this guy. And I'm starting to think about my old boyfriend while I'm with the guy. Me catching myself thinking about the old boyfriend and dropping it, that's consciousness. That's being aware and awake to what is with my own thinking. And next we have something called infinite intelligence, which by a birthright, every human being has infinite intelligence. I call it the human spirit. What makes us different than an animal? It's that fire that burns within us, that knowing when a baby is born, that it's a miracle, that looking out at the expansive Lake Tahoe or the ocean or Yosemite or the Grand Canyon and just getting, wow, this is amazing. That's the infinite intelligence. Bob Roth, who's one of my mentors, I do TM with him every morning. Bob Roth calls it the Genius Lounge. tapping into the genius lounge, tapping into the infinite intelligence of what it means to be human. Here's the interesting thing. Why am I talking about this with regards to culture? Because most organizations think that culture is an outside in. Let's get pizza, let's do a party, let's do management training, let's do communications training. But if we don't fundamentally understand that all human beings, there is no slide to share right now, I'm just talking, thank you. If we don't fundamentally understand that all human beings have this wiring, that they're consumed with thinking, and most people are not aware of their own thinking in the moment, and that everyone has this innate intelligence. It shows up during brainstorming sessions. When somebody comes up with an amazing idea, the infinite intelligence shows up when you stop thinking about your problem and you go take a shower and, oh my God, you have a breakthrough moment. If you study people like Einstein, like Nikola Tesla, like Bill Gates, like Steve Jobs, they speak about these moments where they had epiphanies. That's the infinite intelligence. There's no secret that they have. There's no halo over their head. We all have it. Some people are better at attuning themselves into that infinite intelligence than others. So that's the inside out mechanics. Thought, consciousness, and infinite intelligence. Consciousness, actually, this is a typo, I apologize. It's CTI. Consciousness, thought, and infinite intelligence is available to all of us. And when we tap into that, we have a realization that everything we've ever needed in our life is within us. All of the ideas, knowing what to do next, knowing what to do when we get laid off, knowing what to do when there's a conflict with people at work, it's within us. And once we have that realization and we look to the outside world, we can see all the implications. And we could see that we're designed for well-being and success, all of us, every human being, including people with PTSD. And even Bob Roth says you shouldn't even call it a disorder, because it's post-traumatic syndrome. It's an experience they're having in this moment, but it's not a disorder, because once you tell someone it's a disorder, once you label a disorder, it's permanent, and PTSD is not permanent. So anyhow, once you get the implication of inside out, everything we need is within us, consciousness, thought, and innate intelligence, then we start to see what's happening in the world. Now, here's how most people think. Most people think they are their feelings. They are their observable and other people's observable behavior. Most people think they are their experience. Oh my God, COVID is ruining my life. I know people who are having the time of their life because of COVID. Yes, people are dying. And part of being human is sometimes we die, and it's awful. But are we going to crawl under our bed and forget that we're living? Because this seems to be the way it's going. And it seems to be that we have no idea where the end is in sight. So you can choose to be your feelings, to be a victim of time and a victim of psychology and a victim of your state of mind, or that you are your state of mind and you are your experiences. Or you could say all these things are happening in my world, and actually I'm making a conscious choice to look at life different, to be different. And once you get it for yourself, you can get it for your entire organization. And when you create culture from the inside out, you don't have to spend so much money, and you don't have to have so many programs, and it actually sticks. So outside of feelings, visible experiences, state of mind, psychological, observable is patterns, ego, stress, programming. And when I say programming, I mean those neural pathways that, if you've heard me speak before, that are kind of running the system. It's Margaret always does what Margaret does because that's her programming. Margaret's aggressive because that's her programming. Margaret's a top producer because that's her programming. Sure it is. As I was growing up, I made a decision that if I was not going to be successful, I couldn't feed my kid. It was a pivotal point in my life. That became my programming. Also became my programming that I would be connected 24/7 no matter what. That's not my programming anymore because I now know that I am not my programming. But this is how people show up. They show up with their personal agenda, their ego, their stress, their programming, their patterns. And then what happens is we start to look at the outer ring, and that's we need better teamwork. We need better communications. We need better interpersonal skills. So most companies, when they do training and culture, they start from the outside in. Let's do a communications training. Let's teach people to listen. Let's teach people to do better at follow-up. Let's teach people to be a better team. Let's have some games and some fun. And let's have people be better at interpersonal communications and respect, appreciation. But here's the thing, all of that is superficial if we don't get the inside out nature. So let me explain how this works. I have a client right now, I'm going there Monday. They have a team that is fighting with each other. Fighting, not talking. Everyone has, and they go to the office because they have an essential business. They go to the office, they're 6 feet apart, but they have earphones in and they don't look at each other. And they email each other and text and response, but they are all fighting because one doesn't think the other is working as hard as the other. So they're bringing in the expert. Now, the good news is I've already done this work with them 2 years ago. So I'm just going back to remind them. Everything that you're experiencing about each other is your thoughts. Yeah, you might think Mary Jane Johnson is lazy, but the thought that Mary Jane Johnson is lazy is getting you upset. It doesn't have to. You could say, hey, can we have a conversation about accountability, about workload, and can we kind of collaborate, make sure everybody's doing the same amount of work? Or you can get yourself all worked up because Mary Jane is taking advantage of the system. And that's what we do. Our mother calls, says something we don't like, we get all worked up and it ruins our day. I've heard people say, my day is ruined because my boss didn't say hello to me, or a client canceled an order, or we didn't get that sale. So all of this stuff, I'm not saying all the training on patterns and ego and stress management and state of mind or interpersonal or teamwork is bad. I mean, I do those trainings. My company does those trainings, but we always begin from the inside. We do a level set, which is our first step in creating a constructive culture. The whole first day of the level set is getting people grounded in what's so with their thinking, their level of consciousness, and their ability to tap into their infinite intelligence. And once you teach people that, you do a communications training, and they're better communicators from the get-go because they understand what they have to communicate through all that thought, all that negativity to get people to hear them. So that's just can't spend more time on that. That's like an 8-hour training, but just to have an understanding that everything begins with the inside out for you, for everybody else. So I don't know if you know this guy. He wrote a book called Hit Refresh. He is the new CEO of Microsoft, and he came to Microsoft when Microsoft was struggling greatly with a dysfunctional culture. There was infighting, there was arguing, there was people pitting up against each other for their jobs because the former CEO was all about competition and annihilating the competition. The problem with that competitive mindset, that competitive thinking, is it causes an organization to eat itself alive, to cannibalize itself, because this one is fighting with this one. And he got hired to shift the culture. Well, the interesting thing about Satya Nadella is he comes with Eastern philosophies. You know, the US is behind most of the Eastern philosophies. We're learning, we've got this whole mindfulness movement, but mindfulness isn't enough. People have to understand the mechanics. They have to understand how human beings are wired, you know, like not just psychology 101, but humanities 101. By the way, I think it's the coolest thing in the world. My granddaughter, who's 10, is learning design thinking, humanities, and sociology, 10 years old. I don't think it's an accident. I think it's due to COVID, but we need to teach people these things in our own organizations. So anyway, Satya Nadella, one of the first things he did is he started having these workshops with people to teach them the way the mind works, to teach them what it is to be a human being and not a human doing. And then he put in some core values that would be around respect and appreciation, and not just words, but teaching people how to be those words. And then they created a cause for disabled people, that technology would never be limited to people, if no matter what, whether they had hands or feet or fingers or toes, anybody would have access to technology. And he totally and completely transformed that organization. And when you read the book, he talks about the soul. And that's when I speak about consciousness, thought, and innate intelligence, it's talking about getting to know people at the cellular level, not their job title, their resume, what they can do for you today, but who are they and why do they show up at work every day for you? Wouldn't it be cool? I would have loved if any of my bosses would have ever cared about me more than I was the #1 producer. But it just wasn't what was done in the 80s or the 90s. And the truth is, when I started my own business, I was looking at what people were producing. They were friends, I'd have them over, but I didn't get any of this stuff until the last decade. None of it. And I was raised in a culture where you were only as good as your last dollar produced. Every company I worked for, that's how it was. That's staffing and recruiting. I mean, I'm not saying everybody's like that, but that's how the industry kind of operates. It's like stock trading. So disengagement. It doesn't mean you're a bad company if you have a disengaged workforce. It means you don't understand the inside out principles and the inside out nature of what it is to create engagement, to create constructive culture. But what it's costing you, and this is Gallup and McKinsey, 16% to the bottom line, 18% to productivity, and 60% in terms of service and quality, your customer experience. And actually, McKinsey did a research. I just found this out today. McKinsey did a research on corporate culture. And this is McKinsey, one of the largest consulting companies in the world. And they said the reason cultural initiatives don't last is because the organization doesn't change their mindset. You could say state of mind, mindset, beliefs, philosophy, but it's something they're doing to make the culture better. They're not looking at the innate being of the organization. So the facts are that companies that emphasize culture and behavior and being and understand what makes a human and how to work with humans experience a 202% increase in performance and 147% earnings increase. And it's not because they're cracking the whip. It's not because they're micromanaging. It's not because they don't trust that the employees at home are working. It's because they take their hands off the stove and say, you accept this role, and this is the purpose of the role, and these are the outcomes. And whatever you need support in me to help you do that, that's great. And however many hours it takes for you to do that, hopefully it doesn't take you more than it should, but that's your business. I'm going to pay you to produce a result, and I'm going to treat you like an adult in the process, and I'm going to give you whatever tools and resources you need. And I'm going to help you thrive as a human being. That's just a glimpse into what constructive cultures do. So organizational culture is made up of values, beliefs, behaviors that the company expects, trains to, teaches, rewards the people in the organization for sharing and being motivated by these. But we can't just say, you know, we have someone that I know that's very close to me that I cannot say because this is live and it's on Facebook. They work for an organization that the motto, the culture is work hard, work harder. And everything is about putting more hours in and putting the nose to the grindstone. So people are fried. They're on calls at 9, 10 o'clock at night. They're exhausted. What they don't understand is the basic construct of humanity. You will never, ever get the best out of people when they are burnt out, frazzled, and fried. It's scientific. Any scientific medical journal will tell you under stress, under pressure, under extreme anxiety and exhaustion, performance goes way down. So we have to get grounded in what does it mean to be a human being? And then how do we create the culture we want from that place? So intentional culture, this is the model that we use. It's by an organization called Human Synergistics, and it's a blueprint that we do when we're working with organizations. And we have the people and the organization take 2 surveys, ideal culture and actual culture. Often the ideal culture, the one they want, the intentional, is they want high achievement, everybody producing results, everybody self-actualized, living into their highest level of intelligence and best use of self. And they're humanistic. They understand each other. They're encouraging. They understand that a working mom that's got 3 kids at home and no daycare and no school is probably working double the hours of someone who's not that way. They understand that because they've done the work to do that. And then affiliative is they're sharing knowledge. They're working in teams. This is what people want. However, when they do the actual culture, what they have, often we see this chart over here, where people are acting in aggressive defensive styles, which is the task orientation, where it's all about the task, or passive defensive, where it's too much about the people and about security. I wrote a great article about this, about an extremely right hemisphere culture, extremely left hemisphere. Actually, I did it with Andreas Dinkelman, and then the perfect integrated, or the ideal integrated culture. But let's talk about what doesn't work. When the culture creates itself and it's a manifestation of how people treat each other and how people operate. And if you've got, there's a teacher out there that really is touting perfectionism and how awesome it is. It's not. And she's a psychologist. It is not, because if everything has to be perfect, there's no room for extraordinary. There's no room for innovation. There's no room for creativity. Outstanding is one of Tony Robbins' words. He says, stop being a perfectionist and just deliver outstanding work. Because my version of outstanding and Lacey's might be different. I could never do the marketing things that she does. And I don't micromanage, and I don't have to micromanage her. She gets to go create. Competitive, this is what happened to Microsoft. They were eating themselves alive, fighting for jobs and promotions and attention and budgets, and I'm gonna do it, you're gonna do it. Power, this is where we're powering up over other people. You will do it my way. And opposition, one department arguing with the other department. I've got one of my favorite clients, when we entered Stage Right, they had an extremely oppositional culture, because what got them through the 80s and the 90s was opposition. Now what's getting them through COVID is cooperation. So another unconscious culture is this passive, waiting for approval. Oh, tell me what to do. Sticking with the rules and only coloring inside the lines, or being dependent on the boss to give you atta-girls and atta-boys and I love you, you're so wonderful, thank you, thank you, thank you. You know what? In a constructive culture, you feel appreciated, because you're appreciated naturally. It doesn't have to be in excess. And avoidance, we don't tell people the truth. We don't give people real feedback. We just pray the bad behavior will go away. Or the CEOs out there touting this wonderful culture, but then the truth is people are throwing each other under the bus every day. Nobody consciously creates that culture. Nobody does it on purpose, because performance suffers. But what happens is CEOs and HR folks, and even some of you on the call, don't know what they don't know. And mostly we don't get an MBA in the mechanics of what it is to be a human being. So we're just doing the best we can until we wake up one day and say, holy cow, wow, we don't need those fancy lunches and all the granola bars and all that other stuff. We don't need this big, to bring in, Bono to sing for us. We actually need to teach our managers about what it means to be a human being and how to operate at your highest level, your highest use of self. So next, and this is a little more outside the circle. This isn't the inside, this is getting into the next layer. Who are we as an organization? What's our purpose? What's our why? How do we deliver that purpose? And what is it that we're doing to deliver that purpose? I remember I was talking to a CEO at the Vistage Summit, and he says, well, Maji, I have a purpose. And I said, yes, what is it? And he says, to make as much money as I can. And I said, how enrolling is that for your employees? And he was really embarrassed. But the fact is, the employees don't care that you want to make a lot of money. They want to change the world. They want to be part of the solution to these problems that we are seeing with social unrest, that we are seeing with viruses, that we are seeing with the environment, that we are seeing with the climate, that we are seeing with how we treat each other in our political system right now. The whole system, all of it. People want to be part of the solution. So create your why is, who are you as part of the solution? Culture actualization is a mission that moves, touches, and inspires people, and a vision that is about changing the world. Do research on some of the best missions and visions out there. It calls people forth. It draws them in like a magnet. And then the values. So what I tell my corporate clients is the vision is the island that you're going towards. The mission is where you are now and how you're serving. So let's say you're in a sailboat. The mission is how y'all sail together. And the values are the actual sails and the tacking, and what do we need to adjust? And the values support the mission. What's our behavior? How do we respond to upsets and arguments and disagreements and breakdowns? And how quickly do we get over that stuff? But this is where the magic is. But if you glom on a glossy mission, vision, and values, but the behavior, the real behavior behind the curtain is caca, you're never going to get what you want. You've got to deal with the source. And welcome to heaven, the source is always the chief executive officer and what he or she tolerates from everybody else. And you can tap into what they really need and what they really want by sitting with them and getting curious, not by telling them the laundry list of everything that's not working. Find out their why they did it in the first place, why they started this business in the first place. What's the difference they want to make? I remember asking one CEO who wasn't the best leader, what's your mission? He said, to make the world safer. I said, so how safe is it for people to work in your organization? And that was the beginning of the transformation of that company, because it wasn't safe. He was a yeller and a screamer, and he put his fist down, and he didn't deal with bad behavior, and he would yell and scream at the executives, and then they would leave the room and yell and scream at their people. But he had a big vision, but he was frustrated because his vision was not getting materialized. It wasn't getting actualized, and he didn't know how to deal with it, so he was just frustrated all over people. So again, inside out. Why did that CEO start the company in the first place? What's the purpose? So liberating structures is an awesome way to create engagement, to demonstrate diversity and inclusion. And this is taking the structures that are top down and saying, you know what, we're not going to top down that anymore. Everything that has to do with people, we're going to have the people start to solve. We're going to empower, not empower like 1 Minute Manager. Ken Blanchard wrote a book called The 1 Minute Manager, and then he wrote another book that said empowerment takes more than a minute. Not pointing at people and saying you're in charge, but saying, hey, marketing team, we're not getting the results we want. What do you think we should do? What do you think we can do to increase our numbers? And then having that team collaborate, connect with each other. So there's macro structures like who reports to who, and the people and the jobs and the resources. But microstructures are how decisions are made, how priorities are determined, how workflow is improved, how processes are improved. You know, people will call me and say, we want you to improve a process. I said, well, how I'm going to do it is I'm going to bring the people who are affected by the process in the room, and I'm going to ask them. And all I'm going to do with them is help them tap into their innate intelligence, but I'm not solving the problem. Because how could I? How could I solve the problem? I don't work there. So there's a great book called Liberating Structures. If you're into this, I highly recommend you read it. It's super thick. 33 liberating structures that taps into, unlocks the wealth of talent, capacity, and human spirit at work. We create core values with companies through liberating structures. We improve processes. We create culture coalitions. We redesign job descriptions. We do design thinking through liberating structures. Have had a client who had to shut down the foundry, and they were shutting it down 6 months before time. And typically the old way they did it is they would go into an office and the 4 executives would decide how it was going to be done and tell everybody else. This time they brought 25 people in the room, and the employees and the supervisors, front line, and the managers determined how they were going to do it. And it was the best, most productive shutdown they have ever had, because it came from the inside out. So momentum. Right now, many companies are working remote. And what we hear from our clients is there's concern from their managers about, how do I trust the people that are working for me? How do I know they're really working? And there's concern, how do we keep the energy high? How do we keep people focused? So Keen developed a special program called Momentum. Lacey will put the link if you're curious about it so you can find it in the chat box, but it's a 5-part series. I don't lead it myself. I lead it with another person who's an improvisation person. His name is Aaron. He works with innovation, and we put our heads together and we created this program. And I tell you, you don't have to do the program, but look at least at our copy and see what it is that we're teaching, because this is what's desperately needed in the organizations today. Focus, accountability, engagement, human innovation, and understanding the way the system works, the mechanics of human beings. How do we tap into people's innate intelligence while working remote? There's lots of great ways to do that. So leadership, we would not be doing justice if we didn't say that leadership is the fulcrum of culture. How leadership operates, how leadership treats each other, how leadership honors the core values of the organization. Are they conduits? Are they representatives of the mission? Or do they pay it lip service and say, yeah, but when they leave the executive meeting, they never demonstrate any of those values? Because you could have a CEO who's totally committed, but they're asleep at the wheel, and their executive team is not. And I'm talking about committed to the core values and the mission. So what creates culture is leaders that are operating at their best use of self, at their highest level of intelligence, that are operating in constructive culture, which is having their people, teaching their people, or giving their people the opportunity for fulfillment and self-actualization at work, for high achievement, for human relations, interacting with each other, the human part of it, and affiliation. And then there's the culture, the mission, vision, values, and how we treat each other. And then there's the third leg of the stool, or leg of the triangle, is HR needs to be in a situation where they not only understand the mechanics of the human system and how it works and how thinking and consciousness and innate intelligence works, but they have to understand that every step of that life cycle, every step of that employee life cycle has to be congruent with the mission, vision, and values. Because if any of these 3 rungs of the triangle aren't working, your ship ain't gonna sail. Your sailboat. So at the center of this is state, the state of mind, or as McKinsey said, the state of mindset of the leadership team, the philosophy. How important are people really to them? And then comes the strategy. Most people start with, this is our strategy, this is where we're going, everybody get in gear, let's do it. And they ignore the philosophy, and they ignore the state, and they ignore the people part of it. So leaders, it's about getting results through people, not in spite of people, but I should have said with people. I'm going to change that. It's about optimizing people to their highest and best use of self. The best use of self isn't sitting in the office complaining that you have to go to work when all your friends get to work from home, or complaining that you're at home and you're stuck with your husband day in and day out. That's not the highest use of self. The highest use of self is knowing what my skills are, knowing what my employees' skills are, and then giving them the tools they need and the guidance. If they need it, they may not need it, and the freedom to go unleash themselves, and giving them projects that they can sink their teeth into and feel fulfilled, and then give them inspiration. I can't inspire my team, but I can give them opportunities to get inspired. I can teach them about inspiration. I can teach them that inspiration always and only comes from inside out. You might be inspired by me because I lost 100 pounds, but what you're really, and I didn't, I have one of my co-leaders for Ignite Power has, but what you're really inspired by is the possibility that you could lose 100 pounds. Inspiration always comes from within, and so does engagement, and so does optimization. But the leader sets the stage. The leader creates the conditions. The leader creates the context that can happen in. So understanding, again, the mechanics of how human beings work. I talk about the brain a lot because a lot of what Keen does always begins with the mechanics of being human. How it operates. Well, we have a prefrontal cortex, a right hemisphere, a left hemisphere. The right hemisphere is what wants culture, wants unity, wants everybody to get along. The left hemisphere wants results. We need to integrate. We need to be operating with our entire system working in synergy. We also, because we started hearing from our clients that the kind of leadership training they need now is Inside Out. We created an Inside Out Leadership Survival Series, and Lacey will also put that in the chat so you can check that out. And again, you don't have to go sign up for it, but look and see the curriculum that we developed for catalyzation, revitalization, and harmonizing the world of work. We are being asked to come into entire associations and deal with entire industries because people are now starting to admit that the system is broken. The way they thought they needed to inspire their people is not working. People are operating on pure adrenaline. So check out both of these courses, even if you're creating your own. So when we focus on culture, facts, McKinsey, bottom line profit improves by 8 to 25%. Depending on the level of commitment of the C-suite. What I'll tell you for Keen, we never take a job, even though we've been given lots of opportunities. If the C-suite is not engaged, if they're not going to show up at the training, if they're not going to be coached one-on-one, if they're not interested in learning about the mechanics, they're not a customer for us because we know we can't produce these kind of numbers. Discretionary contribution from the employees increases by 45% when they're unlocked, when they're tapping into their collective intelligence of the organization. People volunteer for things, to run culture committees, to run innovation committees. Engagement and performance elevates by 40%. Operating expenses reduce by 8 to 20%, and unwanted turnover reduces by 30%. You also hire differently. You hire people who are meant to be there because you're not looking at the resume. You're not looking at the outside. You're getting to know people from the inside out. And if you've been through any of our interviews, or if you're working with any companies that work with us, you'll know that that is our whole interview process. We want to get to know people, what's important to them. So we have a 21-day free, or it doesn't have to be 21 days. You could do it in one day, but there's 21-step framework. And if you want to get it, you'll get a different video every day. And we talk about Inside Out. We talk about mind, consciousness, and thought, or the infinite intelligence, and Inside Out. We talk about listening. We talk about leadership development. We even tell you how to do an entire cultural transformation in your organization. So we're coming up on the hour. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. We are out to change the world of work and to give people an opportunity to unlock their wealth of talent, capacity, and human spirit at work all day, every day, and in life. And thank you for joining us today. You might want to write down your biggest learnings, your takeaways, or what you're going to do as a result of being in the conversation. And if you'd like to link in to us, or Twitter us, or Facebook us, or email me directly, you can do that as well. Thank you so much for participating.